Good morning. Welcome to Walking Boxing. It is Sunday, June the 15th, 2025. And yes, it is a fight day. George Kambosos Jr. up against Richardson Hitchens for the IBF 140-pound world title from Madison Square Gardens. Well, sort of Madison Square Garden. It's in the theatre, but still, it's at Madison Square Garden. Should be a big day though. Actually, it's you can't beat fight day though, can you? It's always exciting. Not that stressed about the undercard, if I'm being completely honest. That's why we're not really opening the doors until 11 o'clock. I don't think the main event's on until about 12:30. So I think the people that are coming to watch the fight are coming just to watch George. So I'm not that stressed about maybe just having one prelim fight on beforehand. I think people, being a cold Sunday, there's footy and all that on today and whatever else there is to do, I think most people will just be coming in to watch the fight and going home, I would think. So it's a little bit different, the boxing crowd, I will say. Like it's sort of hard to explain, but well, it's not really hard to explain. It's easy to sort of see, I suppose, when the fights were put on, the crowd that we get in. And the boxing crowd's been harder to, I suppose, break their habits. The boxing crowd is used to now either sitting at home by themselves and watching it on the TV, or watching on the phones, whatever it might be, or with their mates, whatever. But they're used to watching it at home, unless it's probably a big, maybe it's a Tim Tszyu fight or whatever. People sort of they might make a day of it or a night of it, and go out for dinner and then watch it at the pub or whatever. But apart from that, the boxing crowd has been hard to swing. Because as I said, they're used to watching it at home now, and it's hard to break the cycle and habits and all that sort of stuff. The UFC, I must say, again, is also, they're different. It's almost like their habit is to actually go to the pub and watch it. So when we have the UFC on, even if they're not big shows, we get each UFC numbered 1, 3, 1, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is. And they've all been well attended. It's almost like the UFC crew have just been conditioned to get to the pub, and that's where or a bar or whatever, and that's where you watch it. And they all come in. We always have good numbers, and they always sort of get there early. That's the difference as well. They get there early. They stay for the whole card, and that's a credit to the UFC for the amount of, or type of fights they put on and the way they've conditioned their fans. But they get there. Well, they're not like all there at the start, but you do get a fair old crowd in there at the start, and then obviously it builds as the day goes on. But with boxing, it's like, when's the main event on? I'll get there half an hour before it and leave half an hour, or not even half an hour, 15 minutes afterwards. And that's just the way they are. Now, that's obviously the challenge, that is to get the fans to come in and enjoy the day. But again, it's up to the promoters, I suppose, to put the fights on. Although we all know with Riyadh season and everything else, the fight cards have been a hell of a lot better. But maybe it's just been ingrained in us boxing fans for so long that we just, if we're going to go to the pub at all, we just roll in, grab a can of Coke or something and roll out. That's the hardest part too. When you're paying to put the fights on, the boxing fans don't seem to spend either. Not to say anything about boxing fans, it's just the culture I'm saying. I'm just saying, I had one guy one of the fight, might have been the Tim Tszyu fight, came in and he, of course, it's not cheap to put the fight on. This is what sort of riles up the publicans, I suppose. And if you are a Republican, you'll get where I'm coming from. But comes in and asks for a glass of water. I know I'm getting way off track here, but sometimes you got to jump on your soapbox. Grabs a glass of water. Didn't buy a bottle of water to help support the cost of the fight. Asked for a glass of water out of the tap because, of course, you've got to supply free water. Now, I know I'm, again, going way off track here and having a bit of a whinge, but it's funny to the fans. But anyway, that is the different fight fans that we get. Most, I will say, 95 or 98, 99% of the fans do support the pub when they do come in. They'll buy something to drink and get a pie or some chips or something like that. So I'm only sort of picking that one out, but it just made me laugh. It stuck with me. Like, hang on, mate, I'm paying $700 for this fight, and you're going to get a glass of water out of the tap? Come on. Anyway, as I said, it's 1 out of a million. So But I really like the day. I really like the people that come in. I always make sure I get to the pub to watch it. That's why I don't do the watch-alongs anymore. I like to get to the pub and talk to the other boxing fans in there and chat about the fight and pour a few beers, all that sort of stuff. So it's a bit of fun anyway. But I'm interested to see what sort of crowd we get there today. And if we do get a crowd, it's not costing anything, by the way, so I'm not that stressed, but because it's on DAZN. But I'm intrigued to see if George Kambosos is still that guy, whether he's still got a crowd, whether he's still got the fan base that are going to come out on a Sunday and watch him. I think there'll be a few. Anyway, I've waffled on far too long about today's fight and what's happening. Let's go back in history for a bit of a history lesson of what happened on this day. Where are we? As I bring it up here. All right, as I lose the page, always. All right, so 1963 in the Philippines, American Eddie Perkins defeated Roberto Cruz to win the WBC Super Flyweight title. In 1967, Mexico's Vicente Saldivar defeated Britain's Howard Winston in Wales to win the WBC Featherweight title. In 67, Japanese fighter Yoshiaki Numata defeated Filipinos Gabriel Alorde in Tokyo for the Super Featherweight World title. In 1983, this guy was a good fighter. Jaime Garza won the WBC Super Bantamweight title with a knockout of Bobby Burner in the second round in Los Angeles. He was a good fighter. I remember he was a bit of a wrecking ball as well. Only small, not much of him, but I think he'd won nearly all his fights by knockout. And then he run into a guy by the name of Juan Meza, who was a world-class fighter, but I think he'd lost a couple of world title fights before that, and he knocked out Jaime Garza in one round, just hit him with a left hook and boom, all over, and he never recovered from that and pretty much vanished. So that's how quick it can come, and that's how quick it can go. And this one, 1984. This is the second or third, probably third fight I'd ever sat down and watched as a big fight card. I'm referring to Thomas the Hitman Hearns and the Hands of Stone Roberto Duran, 1984 for the WBC Super Welterweight title. As I said, this was a third fight. I remember, I think I said the other day, Holmes Cooney was the first fight I ever sat down and watched on TV as a 8-year-old. Then the second one was Marvelous Marvin Hagler and Mustafa Hamsho. That was at Madison Square Garden in 1983, and then this was the next one I remember watching was Thomas Hearns and Roberto Duran, and I just remember the aura of Thomas Hearns. I mean, Roberto Duran was even then an all-time great multi-world champion. It just given Hagler a really good fight as well as he'd won the junior middleweight title off Davey Moore the year before. Was still well-renowned. And g'day, how you doing? Got a little dog there. I better get him there. Come here, buddy. I've got him there. Get his lead. Oh. Little puppy dog there. But I remember even when Hearns got in the ring, he had that big posse, the Kronk Gym, and he just had that hitman aura about him. He was so focused, and he just had that look in his eye that he meant business. I remember it. And Duran got in there and looked surprisingly, not timid, but just not his usual. There was no aura about him. It was just him and his team. He didn't seem like he had a big supporter base. It almost looked like I hate to say it, almost like he knew his fate. It just wasn't. Normally when Duran would get in the ring, he would be so confident, that look in his eye, that steely look in his eye that he would get, and he would just be ready for battle, and he had that he'd bounce in the corner, just knowing that he was a killer and he was gonna knock the opponent out. But against Thomas Hearns, it wasn't like that. For the first time I'd ever seen Duran, probably the only time I've ever seen him, even after that, was that look of almost trepidation. I can't explain it, but go back and look at it yourself. And when Duran's in the corner, he just did not have that same look. And then when the fight started, he was super cautious. I mean, you would have to be against someone like Hearns. I mean, Hearns, what was Hearns? 6'2", 6'3". Duran was about, 5'6", 5'7", massive height difference. But I remember Hearns coming out super confident, took centre ring, and just speared that jab out. The first round was actually really, well, low-key, I suppose. Duran, from a distance, he was sort of looking and trying to work out the size and the speed and the power of Thomas Hearns, who was such a completely different fighter than what he was at welterweight. He filled out into that. He had that massive, big V-shaped back, just super powerful jab. That was Thomas Hearns at his peak, and he speared out the jab, and then he set Duran up. Nothing had happened at all in that first round, probably the first 2 minutes or whatever it was of that first round, 2.5 minutes. And then he speared the jab out and just boom, lowered that right hand. Down went Duran for the first time. And I think it's shock horror, because Duran, I think he'd been down, but not to that extent, like where he'd really been knocked down hard. And he got up, looked shocked. I think he was definitely hurt. There was no doubt about that. I mean, and who knows, maybe the referee these days would have probably even stopped it then, because he was definitely dazed. But he got up, and Hearns went after him, and it was more just a sort of, the second one was not the same sort of knockdown. It was just arms and legs sort of going everywhere. Duran was trying desperately to hold on. Hearns was just throwing him from everywhere. And Duran sort of just went down with it, without a real solid punch landing. It was just an accumulation of punches being thrown at him that he hit the deck and went down. It was saved by the bell. Got up, went to the wrong corner when he got up, and got back to the corner, and he was in all sorts of trouble. And then to start the second round, well, there was no mucking around. It was just Thomas Hearns straight into Duran, set him up on the ropes, had him hurt again. And that right hand, wow, that is, I think, in my opinion, the best knockout I've ever seen. The cleanest, purest, methodical, whatever you might want to call it, knockout. He jabbed to the body and then straight over the top with the right hand, hit Duran flush, and he fell face first to the canvas, and it was stopped on the spot. So just a blistering performance, if you can call it, if that's the word, from Thomas Hearns. And of course, that set him up for the shot at Marvin Hagler. And surprisingly, when he did fight Hagler, he fought, well, in my opinion, the exact way he shouldn't have fought against Hagler. He went out there, and there was no setting Hagler up, and not that Hagler gave him much opportunity, by the way, did he? Because he was right on his chest and just making him fight. But there was no composure by Hearns, no setting Hagler up, nothing. It was just on from the word go. And that's obviously a credit to Hagler, who just rolled the dice that Hearns couldn't knock him out with that right hand, and just took him head on and didn't give him the opportunity to set him up like he had done against Duran. And I must admit, even though I was 9 years old, 10 years old, whatever it was, big Duran fan at the time, mainly just watching him through or reading about him in the magazines, to be honest. I think that was probably the first time I'd ever seen him fight live, because again, we didn't get the fights here, so we had to read about it in KO magazine and the Ring magazine and all those types of ones. But to see him knocked out in that devastating way, I think everyone, even as a 9 or 10-year-old, I thought that was it for Duran. And who would sort of guess that in 5 years' time he would fight Iran the Blade Barkley and win the WBC middleweight title? Just an amazing fighter. Now, speaking of Hearns and Duran, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a heads up, just a little bit of gossip that might be coming, is that Duran and Hearns may be heading to Australia for a similar thing that we saw with Terence Crawford. So just keep a lookout for that. I'm sure there'll be more details to come. But yeah, Hearns and Duran might be here together in Australia for a similar type of sports night that we saw with Terence Crawford. So keep your eye out for details on that one. Should be a ripper tour or whatever it's going to be. So to have them both here, I'm sure Duran's definitely been here before. I'm not so sure about Hearns, but what an opportunity that would be to see both of those guys. All right, well, let's get on to today's fight. And Kambosos and Hitchens, who wins and why? As I said, I'm not that stressed about the undercard. Probably the only one probably a couple I'll take note of. Of course, Terramona, I'll keep a lookout for. Wasn't sure what to make of his opponent, actually. He was pretty brave. He's about 30 or 40 pounds lighter than Terramona. I can't even remember his name, but it was a bit of an awkward standoff or face-off. But I think Terramona will get the job done there. I haven't even watched his opponent fight, but judging by the looks of him, He's 9-0 though, so you never know. But either way, I'm excited to see Terramona on the world stage in New York. And then the other one is probably Andy Cruz. I think this is the guy that will be the heir apparent at lightweight. I think he'll be the guy. Hopefully he will see him in there with the likes of Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson. But he's a very, very talented guy. Andy Cruz, that typical Cuban sort of style. He's only had a handful of fights, but probably a little bit like a Lomachenko. A lot of amateur fights. Olympic gold medalist, of course, and can fight. So I think he will be the next in line to win the IBF lightweight title. Who is it? It's Mason and Noakes next for that. No, it's for the WBO belt, isn't it? So either way, but I think who's fighting for the IBF lightweight belt, whoever it is, Andy Cruz will beat him. That's just my opinion. They did say the other day, who was it? It's not Mason and Noakes, because that's for the WBO. I've got a mental blank here, guys. I'm sure you'll let me know, and I'm sure as soon as I finish this video, I will remember. But either way, I think Andy Cruz will be a fighter to watch in the lightweight division as the dominoes fall and who gets the belts and who moves up and whatever else happens. So, but as for the main event, look, I won't lie, this is going to be tough for George. The build-up's been great. I think George will give it everything he can. I'm really happy to see that sort of glint in his eye, the sparkle that he had against Lopez. I know, again, having said yesterday, he does rub a few people up the wrong way with the way he acts, but that's just George. That's the way he gets himself up. A lot of fighters do things in a different way. Others are nice and calm through the whole thing and don't really care too much about the weigh-ins and the press conferences and all that sort of stuff in interviews. George does. I think that's what gets him up. Now, will it be enough to get him up to beat Hitchens? Look, I'll admit I'm doubtful. I can see that, in my mind, I can see that Hitchens will box from a distance. George will do everything he can to get in and will just struggle to, as they say, let the hands go, because Hitchens just won't be there. And if he does, he'll probably be countered. So even though I'm really hoping that George can get the win, I've got a feeling that it'll be a pretty lopsided decision. I think George will I think he'll just struggle to get inside. And George is not really an inside fighter in the typical sense. He's not a brawler. He's not a big puncher. I just think he will try and push the fight, but will struggle to pull the trigger against Hitchens, who will just make him pay every time he comes in. And I just get the feeling that, Hitchens will box to a pretty easy 12-round decision, I would think. Look, maybe a late-round stoppage, I don't know. I'm not sure whether Hitchens is that type of guy either, to put someone like George away. But one thing I'll say about George, this is not derogatory about him at all, because, as I said, I really hope he gets the win. But I just think, again, I said yesterday or the day before, what it was about, just giving him his respect. This is a guy that consistently calls out the best. And I think he's got the best resume as far as who he's fought in Australian boxing. And now, okay, he didn't beat Haney, he didn't beat Lomachenko, arguably he didn't beat Maxie Hughes, but the fact he's fought these guys and consistently called them out, again, I think you've got to give him a bit of respect. Is he the best fighter in Australia? No, I would think that Jai and Tim and arguably Liam Paro and that are above him. But I don't think, even if you're his most ardent critic, I don't think you can discredit the fact of that he's consistently called out and fought those, the best fighters in the division. He could have easily, when he won that lightweight title, had a voluntary and maybe tiptoed around it for starters, but he wanted Devin Haney. He could have milked a little bit more out of that world title, but he wanted him, and then he wanted Lomachenko, and he called out Hitchens. Now, of course, I know there's the argument, did he deserve a shot at this belt? Well, that's arguable as well, maybe not. But the fact is, he's got the opportunity on behind him, and I just don't think, even if you don't like him as a person or rate him as a fighter, I think the fact that he's, unlike a lot of fighters out there, has consistently said, hey, I'm here, let's go, and wanted the best fights. I think you've got to give him his respect on that one, I would think. But I think today that Richardson Hitchens, in my opinion, will win a lopsided 12-round decision, unanimous decision. Maybe 10-2, 9-3, something like that. But I'm hoping we get the George that we had 4 years ago, and he turns back the clock, and he gives us a great performance. So anyway, we'll see with that one. But that's, what's that on? What did I say? 10. I think it's on at about 12:30 today, I think they said. So, all right, now just a couple of things. There's word that, actually just on Kambosos, sorry, I've got to backtrack a little bit on George Kambosos. Now, in Australia, with all the TV rights and media rights and all that sort of stuff, I know there's agreements with everything else, with, there's obviously no limit, and the big papers in Australia, I'm only looking at the Melbourne one, so the Herald Sun. Countless stories on Jai Pattaya, countless stories on Tim Tszyu, countless stories on everybody. There has not been one story in the Herald Sun about George Kambosos fighting for the world title. Now, the boxing section is obviously looked after by boxing writers, and whether it's writers based in Melbourne or writers based in Sydney or Brisbane, and they take them through the Associated Press, not one article to say that George Kambosos is fighting in America for the world title. So I just think that is disgraceful, regardless of if there's agreements in place or contracts in place or whatever it is. This is a newspaper. Now, I'm not sure what it's like in Sydney. I'm sure there's a lot more up there about him. He's a Sydney fighter. Not sure about Brisbane or whatever. But there is a boxing section in the paper. There are boxing writers. So I don't give a shit about the so-called contracts or agreements, whatever they have with certain promoters and all that sort of stuff. The fact that a major Australian newspaper with designated boxing writers have not put one article about George Kambosos fighting for the world title in America is pathetic and disgraceful. So just my little 2 cents there. I mean, report, regardless of who it is, report the fact that an Aussie's fighting for a world title. That's your job. So anyway, that's the world we live in these days, where news is based on relationships, not with what's actually happening and what's worthy of a story. So anyway, it doesn't matter. Overseas, I'm sure, and definitely all over the boxing sites today. I mean, it's just everywhere, so that's good. That's what counts. But what hope has boxing got in this country when we've got an Aussie fighting for a world title and can't even get one small little headline or whatever to say he's even fighting? So, which means most Aussies don't even know he's fighting today for the world title, which is, again, disgraceful. All right, there's word, maybe, Sergey Bohachuk. There's rumours that he might be fighting Bakram Murtazaliev later in the year. And it might be, I think they were talking about the Canelo Crawford card. How good would that be? Bohachuk, he did say he wouldn't have minded. Maybe I think Turkey must have promised him a big fight after what happened with Ortiz, I think, and that's the card they're looking to put it on. I think he wanted the winner of Tszyu and Fundora. That'll be too quick a turnaround, you would think, only a couple of months. So the rumours are that we could see Bakram Murtazaliev, who's really been pushing for a fight as well, fight. So Bohachuk and Murtazaliev. So I think it'd be a great fight, and it would be a great addition to that card. And another one they're looking at, Joseph Parker against Derek Chisora for Chisora's 50th fight. I don't know why there's this massive amount of attention on Chisora's 50th fight, but looking at him fighting Joseph Parker on the Usyk and Dubois rematch. What's that, on July 19th? So I couldn't really give two shits about the fight, to be honest, but there's this big hoo-ha. Who's Derek Chisora going to fight? I always thought he was just a glorified club fighter, if I'm being honest. I know he's entertaining and he's tough and hard and he's fought everybody multiple times, but good on him. He's got to 50 fights, but I'm not sure why there should be this whole campaign of who's he going to fight and who's going to get the lucky or being picked as a lucky person to fight him in his 50th fight. I don't get it. But if you are interested in Derek Chisora, that seems to be what's going to happen. He's going to fight Joseph Parker on the Usyk and Dubois undercard. So guys, that's going to do it for today. Almost home now. Have a quick shower, jump in the car, head up to Bendigo for the fights, and can't wait, as I said, to see hopefully another world champion from Australia with that belt around the waist in George Kambosos. So guys, have a great day if you're watching the fight. Of course, we'll have a full review tomorrow, and we'll catch you then.